they're dead. They're all messed up. All messed up.
You wouldn't give her that flower, would you?
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Just finished it an hour ago. And can I tell you how that movie messes up the two that came before it? So if you remember the first two places, they're running through the woods and stuff, trying to find a safe place to be and whatever. In day one,
Yeah.
right from the beginning, it's established that monsters don't go in the water. So if you go on or in water, you're safe. Within 20 minutes of there being monsters, they established the water is safe.
So they went full sign.
Yeah. So, but that makes the first two completely nonsensical. Go to a boat, Jim, and get on a boat.
I thought you were speaking in a Canadian accent there. I was waiting for you to finish your statement. What a boat, Jim.
Get on the boat, Jim. I was so mad.
Oh my God.
I was so sensed.
When you have writers jump into everything else, it's non-canonical. Even if it's the creator who does it, to go off like Saints of Newark. I was so excited for that prequel. David Chase was writing it. He messed up the whole story and he created it. So to hear about this, Quiet Place Day One and then messing that up, I mean, watch the films.
Is it animated or is it a movie?
No, it's live action.
It's live action. Is Emily Blunt in it? I know her only weakness is a rusty nail.
No, nobody from the first two is in it.
She's not in it.
Nobody.
It'd be cool if John Krasinski was in it.
Yeah.
The prequel style. Was Cillian Murphy the dude who was living in the furnace in the second one?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that Cillian Murphy? That was a weird kind of role for him too. I was the neighbor who was scoping out your wife for 8 years. Now you're gone.
In the
Crawling out
boiler.
of the furnace. In the boiler. Would have been cool if it was animated. I'd watch a Quiet Place animated film for sure.
Yeah, I probably would
I think
too.
it would be neat.
As long as they figure out their lore.
Yeah. Well, you can't come back from that.
No.
They're doing Cloverfield 4 is coming. I think we've touched on that. And that's another one where I feel like we're going to get the final nail in the coffin of the precarious Cloverfield lore. That one seems like this will probably kill that franchise. Rightfully so. The scariest thing in that franchise is John Goodman in the Cloverfield Lane movie. And I stand by that. His performance is phenomenal. But what is animated is part of Zombiology, which is the movie we're going over this week. Welcome to Xenomania. It's our 4th episode. We're hitting zombies again.
Yeah, we've hit zombies.
But this time we're hitting zombies out of Hong Kong, maybe.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
Which you have to do, theoretically. You have to hit zombies hard.
Right in the head.
Yes. Which they establish in the movie like 80 minutes into it. So Zombiology, for people who don't know, came out in 2018. It's produced in Hong Kong, for Hong Kong, by Hong Kong. So it's Chinese, and I erroneously thought this must be Japanese because it comes equipped with multiple waifus. There's a shonen angle to it. There's a big, I will power up and protect my friends kind of vibe to it. But it is most assuredly Chinese.
It is.
And John dug this one up too.
Looking for this.
How? How did this one?
I think this one came from another podcast that no longer exists.
Oh, cool.
And they put out a line on through Dread Central of these B movies and underseen foreign movies.
Okay.
I didn't feel like it had a B movie vibe. The production was very high valued, especially with a lot of CGI and the chicken. That's going to haunt me tonight. But I loved it. I want to be its friend, but I know you're going to turn me into a zombie.
So I recognize that it is 100% a chicken mascot. However, every time I see it, I imagine that it's one of those egg in a nest sandwich things, where you put the egg in the middle of the bread and then you toast it up. That's all I see when I see that thing.
Yeah, you call it egg in a nest? We used to call it egg in a hole growing up, you heathen.
Yeah, well.
Egg in a basket, gentlemen.
Egg in a basket. You're so British.
Yes.
Egg in a basket.
To be fair, I had to Google what it was actually called because I was just calling it egg and toast for the longest time. So I know it's not just called egg and toast.
Egg in a basket. Yeah, we used to call it eggs in a hole. We tried making them for our kids for a while. Then we just started doing soft-boiled eggs because they couldn't handle. There's too much going on there. Yeah, he does look like that too when he's walking them down. He does look like a egg in a hole, egg in a basket kind of deal for sure.
Didn't you notice his eyes? One was smaller than the other. One was huge, and then the other one was just this tiny. Okay. Like, I was just like, is he winking at me the entire time?
Yeah, I think that's to make him look like he's angry or whatever his facial expression needs to be for whatever he's the mascot of in Hong Kong.
Mhm.
And I'm sure it's probably their Chick-fil-A or something like that. They must be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe they used it." But none of us know what the hell's going on, and that happens a lot in this movie. There's a lot of references that are very local to Hong Kong that nobody else will really get unless you're researching it, which we did. And for example, the pushy real estate guys,
Mhm.
apparently that's a thing in
Yep.
Hong Kong. They stalk young people and try to get them into apartments, cruddy little apartments.
Mhm.
Which is creepy because they're just running up.
Yeah, the whole time it's like that running joke with them.
I mean, we sort of have the opposite now, don't we, in this country? I don't know about you guys, but I, at least 3 or 4 days a week, get things in the mail from guys offering cash for my home. It's just sort of in reverse.
Oh yeah.
We get stalked by the guys who want to sell it to
Yeah.
buy your house, not sell you a house.
That is true. They want to give you less than top dollar on your house. And usually it's the front for a corporation to buy your home because there's a ton of companies buying up tons of houses to manipulate the housing market. Get your tinfoil hats, listeners, because that's one of the big ones coming for you. The movie starts out as a slow burn. So I'm a giant weeb. I love my anime. I just started watching Solo Leveling on Crunchyroll the other night. I was really excited. I have a new show because there's been, there's not a lot out there to watch anymore. My Attack on Titan ended, Vinland Saga's dry, all of them. Jujutsu Kaisen finished up. There's no Demon Slayer, all that stuff. So they start out this movie and it's an anime style fight and it's cool. And I thought for a second, when John mentioned it, he didn't tell me it was fully in Chinese. So you're watching it. You can watch a dubbed version, but I watched it sub because I'm a purist. And I saw it animated and I was like, oh my God, is this a 2-hour long anime movie that he just roped us into? Because I'm so in. And then it switches into real live actors. We get introduced to Lone and Young, the two main characters. And it is a slow start. They have some comic relief in there, but I'm not going to say don't go out and watch this movie. I'm not going to crap all over it. It's a low budget movie that does a lot with the money they had. And a lot of it does land, but it is one thing you have to prepare yourself for is you've got a 35-minute exposition sort of beginning.
You do. They sort of established this dragon's hero arc for Lone and Young. A heaven and earth dragon, and they just sort of
and that's in the mythology.
Yeah, and the beginning is really just them and their friend, who it turns out may or may not be a government operative, filming their lives. There's nothing to film, but they're documenting everything.
So it looks like a found footage film.
I was gonna say you're talking about Yit and the Special Abnormal Activity Squad.
Yes.
That's one of the things about this is they almost use it as comic relief when they expose some of the stuff they have to do to make the movie work. There's one point where they literally have no way to get to where they're going, and a truck just randomly rolls into the frame and a dead body falls out. They're like, we really could use a truck right now. And it just shows up and they're like, oh, all right. And they just get in and they drive away. That was pretty funny. And there's a bunch of other stuff they do as well that I can't think of in the moment, but they don't have a lot of money and resources, so they have to make certain things work. What I did find out is Sean and Wing are two characters that are prominent Chinese actors that did this movie.
I did not know that.
So when you think back to the movie and you think of their presence and what they do during the movie, it actually makes sense because they are good actors.
Yes.
And you can tell the difference between them and everybody else. There's waifu number 1, who we meet early on, and she's practicing with a bow staff out in the street and all the guys are watching her.
Yep.
And waifu number 2 is literally a waifu. She's a wife that they find during the zombie apocalypse portion of the film. And she was just sleeping on a bench, randomly alive. And she wanted some food. She demands food.
Yes.
Oh yeah, because she got turned down at her wedding. The groomsman doesn't show. She gets the text and she just wants ice cream and potato chips as she screams at Lone about on top of the roof. That was his dream girl, though. That was Shuen, because that's the woman who does the Taekwondo tournaments and stuff. So he's all in heaven when he sees her. And she's like, I just want food. I'm not getting married. There's a zombie apocalypse. Let it have me. And he's like, no, there's going to be people affected. Basically me, if you die. There was a lot of good little stuff in it. I remember in the beginning with the little kid with the push pins when
Sometimes.
he puts them in. And then, thumbtacks? All right. Now, after that, I was watching that.
Them into his hand.
Oh my God, I couldn't wait for that little kid to get pummeled. And when it happened, I was just, I'll be honest, I was like, yeah, good for them. And then they get all worried because because they think they did a crime. No, you were killing a zombie, gentlemen. You were doing what you were supposed to do.
It's so random that they chose zombies. This movie could have used anything else too. The zombie, so you have a shonen anime with the power of friendship we will succeed plotline and the mashed up right next to a zombie apocalypse, and it works well. But it's true, it could be a goblin invasion. It could be anything. They could have done Ghoulies 6 or whatever they'd be up to for this. And these guys could have used that. And it being zombies, though, makes it cool because you see why they made that little kid such a dick. Because when they inevitably have the kid zombified,
Mhm.
and that's actually the part that kicks off the film, by the way. The action portion of the film is what happens to this kid. It is hilarious. And you love every second of it because he's a little shit.
Yeah, and but even then, they establish how good Lone and Young are because they already don't like the kid. They already know the kid is a jerk, but they still have to argue over whether they should pummel him. Should we kill this kid? Oh,
Right.
It's a kid. We can't. It's still a big fight for them, no matter how bad. And then just the one throwaway line in that scene, again, fatty, is amazing.
That is good. I like how they chastise him for how he's treating his parents as he's eating their
Yeah.
faces too. That's pretty funny. Dude, you can't treat your parents like that. They're very out of touch. They're very dumb. The two main characters. Well, the main character's Lone. The two guys, they're best friends. It's so the whole idea of the movie that we're glancing over is that Lone specifically has a fantasy of being a hero and overcoming and say he's a savior complex and all of that. And he's just a really good guy. Now he was raised by Sean. He calls her auntie.
Mhm.
She's not really his aunt though. I don't.
No.
And his dad left and is a dick
Mhm.
or was a dick. And his whole portion of the movie is basically one big redemption arc, kinda. And yeah, so Lone, that's Lone's thing. He wants to be accepted. He's literally an anime character.
He's got the basis of it.
I wrote as one of my notes, Lone kind of lives in a fantasy world with no rent and monsters to vanquish. That's his whole world, even before there's zombies.
That's true. And then when he gets his purpose, it's almost tongue in cheek as he hits the benchmarks of the hero's journey throughout the film and evolves and becomes the heroine. He consistently saves people who don't deserve saving. Well, not necessarily, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
He's always getting people to want to live and things like that as he ambles on. And then we find out, I don't want to get to the ending yet, but they have some kick-ass action scenes in between from, I don't know, from about an hour in to through the end, really. But from an hour in through the last 20 minutes, there's some cool group fight scenes and they have some awesome homemade weapons.
Are you talking about the drill, the extension with the saw at the end?
Mhm.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that thing is amazing. And they had he has the chain too with the spike bucket thing.
Uh-huh.
With the helm, the guillotine, he calls it.
Yeah, that all of it. I'm just watching it. So now you have to imagine we're all adults. I'm doing air quotes for those listening with jobs and responsibilities. So I watched this movie in 4 sittings, and I'm trying to pay attention when they're sitting there doing the Home Depot battle axe fight scene stuff and just screwing things together to kill the zombies. It was cool.
I love the first time they take them out, though, and Young turns the Saul one on, and it works for about a second, and the battery dies.
But that's kind of like the way they are. They're not very good. They don't turn them into effective heroes, and I like that.
Mhm.
They're not those guys. Not to say that they never could be, but they're not those guys, and that's what keeps the comedy going in the movie a little bit is them consistently screwing up.
It also gives
Yes.
a connection because they have flaws, and with those flaws, I mean, everyone has flaws. So watching the film, you find a connection with these characters like, oh, this could happen to me, or, the battery dying or being in a dire situation where it's like, shit, what do I do? You kind of can relate. And I don't know, I felt like there was a relation with Lone and Young. I mean, Young kept me cracking up, especially with the one sit up line. He's like, he only does one sit up. It's when he gets out of bed in the morning. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
shit, this is hilarious. It's right.
The main bad guy uses that again at the end of the movie too. And the thing I like about Young is Young shows up in the frame when Lone is doing something. He gets punched in the balls a couple times and stuff.
Mhm.
And remember when he shows up with the crackers for the bride? That's what I forget her name.
Shuen.
Shuen. He walks up with Shuen.
Swing.
He shows up with the crackers for her because she's hungry and she's hangry.
Mhm.
So he hands crackers to Lone so he can feed this angry woman of his dreams.
Yeah.
They're the best of pals, man. They got each other's back, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. It's just the way he does it, though. He's like, "Ta-da," then he hands the crackers over, and then he just like, scurries out of the frame. He knows that this isn't his scene,
Mhm.
kind of thing. It's funny.
It happens earlier too when Young is walking with Yit down the sidewalk and he shoos Lone away. and she's trying to follow him. He's like, no, this is for us. He's like, I can't have you cross. There's cars coming. And it shows an empty road. She's like, there are no cars. He's like, no, there's cars.
And then he has to, by standing in the middle of the road as there's a van coming.
Oh, yeah.
The
They're
guy's on the cell phone looking at receipts, driving all crazy, and then he yells at them at the end of it. Like, you were wrong too, bro.
He's the stereotypical distracted driver, just swerving all over the place. And Young's not going to be able to stop him. And then Lone comes and joins in. And really what's going to happen is they're both going to get smoked by a van. The driver comes, gets his end, but
Right. Their innocence in a way. At that part, it's kind of funny. There's a few things about this that I wanted to touch on, but the main one I really wanted to get into was that it came out in 2018, right? And then we had the Chinese, the CCCP. What is mainland China called now? People's Republic of China.
Yes.
They fully took over control of Hong Kong right as this was happening. And the film kind of comes out right in the middle of that. And it really seems like a metaphor for that as well. That's the big evil that the youth of Hong Kong is going to be fighting. Any teeth to that idea?
I can get behind it. I mean, zombies are sort of like mindless and, following. So, it sort of falls in line with, a generation of people falling in line with communists taking over, and then the youth sort of trying to fight it off. Yeah, I can see that.
And ultimately losing, which sucks too.
They kept the Chinese lore with zombies, with the spirits, and how the spirits infect the body. They take over the body, and that becomes a zombie. I'm happy they kept that lore still with the Chinese culture, because here in America, it's usually like chemicals or something or that create the zombie. In Chinese lore, it's spirits. So I was happy that they kept that.
Yeah, they did. And the zombies work as an occupying force. And then at the end, you get their sort of the added arsenal of eggs as exploding projectiles.
You're getting back to the chicken again, everybody.
I will always come back to that damn chicken.
There's a part where there's a carpet bomb of exploding eggs that comes at the crew. It's pretty funny. When the action stuff, it's not bonsai level crazy, but it's funny. There's crazy action. The fighting, it doesn't remind me of Chinese. Chinese cinema there's a different sort of flow with regard to their fighting. When you see, I don't know, the old style movies and things like that are actually Chinese, the animated movies that are Chinese, they don't tend to have the sharp cuts and changes. This felt Japanese, the way they did that. Chinese and Korean movies specifically tend to be a little bit more, not American, they're their own thing for sure, but less sharp in cutting. Japanese and Indian action sequences have something in common where it's very in your face, funny, slappy kind of thing. And their action is very frame by frame by frame by frame. It's keeping you looking back and forth, kind of like you're watching a tennis match and fast forward. So I was surprised to see that, like, oh, this is a Chinese movie, but I kept going back in my head, I feel like this is a Japanese movie, especially with the fighting.
Yeah,
It felt like a Japanese movie.
it did. It also felt like a Chinese Evil Dead. You have the improvised weaponry, you have this sort of frenetic fighting and stuff. There are times where it feels very Evil Dead to me.
I could see that.
Would you say more two because of the comedy aspect?
So, yeah, you could go 2. It's not quite as comedic as Evil Dead 2 can be, but it's got the comedic elements. It's somewhere in between 1 and 2.
Makes sense. So the crux of everything comes down to Lone's father's redemption arc. How does that end? Is he redeemed, fellas?
As much as he's gonna be, I mean, he's estranged from Lone after attempting an insurance scam with Shan that winds up with her brother dead and Shan crippled, and he just sort of runs off after that. And then he comes back willing to do anything to be back in Shan's life and Lone's life, offering the sword, cut me, cut me, cut me. And he takes the sword and cuts his hair off. And
that's very Japanese too, by the way. Maybe it's Chinese too, but to cut your hair off in disgrace.
And there's something like really amusing watching Lone confront his dad in half of a panda costume.
Yeah, that's funny too.
Who's your son?
Yeah, they seem to do something like that through the whole movie. Every time there's a heavier emotional scene, they sort of take the edge off it a little bit with something goofy, either during or immediately after. Like when Wing is ultimately redeemed as a father, and he's running out to distract the eggs, and he takes the egg to the head, and you're like, oh my God, they just killed Lone's dad. And then every time you would almost feel really sad, they're going to cut in with something goofy.
Yeah. that comic relief thing is well utilized in this for sure.
When the egg hits the propane tank, it follows up a lot with the comedy because once that
Mhm.
propane tank explodes, all the eggs become fried eggs, and then you just see the chicken feet just looking at all the fried eggs.
Everything they do with that stupid chicken lands. Arguably not maybe the end, but the rest of it's pretty damn funny. So with the movie, the tough part about doing an episode on a movie like this is that it's on substance that we can chew on. It's not light on substance in general, but it is there. It casts a really wide net. And so nothing's super deep. All the characters are very cookie cutter, which is fine because of what the movie is. It's good, it's entertaining, but there's no deep roots that we have with the director. We are not understand 100% of the references, or maybe like even 5% of the references. It's a subtitled Chinese film, so that's tricky to follow along with in general too. And it's doing three things at once, where it's trying to do Lone's hero arc, Wing's redemption arc, and there's another thing going on there with the whole group coalescing and the power of friendship aspect of it as well. And there's probably 2 or 3 more with the other characters that I'm not touching upon because I can't think of it right now.
Well, that's what happens when you have like 6 screenwriters.
Yeah, they all wrote it.
Yeah, there was 6 screenwriters who wrote the whole film. So from what I was reading, it was pulling idea from idea to idea and then combining it all to form this movie. But again, they were just having fun, I feel. I don't think it was one of those, this is going to make cinema history. It's just, it's a fun movie for people to enjoy. And I feel like a lot of people, I mean, I feel like we all enjoyed it. The only thing is I agree with the story. There's a lot of story with Kit. Or Yet, I'm sorry, I keep calling her Kit. It's not the car, no David Hasselhoff. It's just she gets swarmed by the real estate agents and then she disappears. And then Young finds the negative radar, which, just to let you guys know, she has a negative radar that basically tells you when a person's being negative or positive, and that's how she can find the zombies, is through the negative energy.
I forgot about that.
Well, it's like they're like, "Oh, what happened to her?" And Young's like, "Oh, she's on an important mission." You don't know if she's on an important mission. Like, you're just presuming. And I feel like there's a lot of presumption written in it, but then they fill it in later like, "Oh, yeah, this did happen." Like with Wing, he gets bitten when he's making the eggs for Shan. You hear noises, so you think something happens, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, I got bit." When did you get bit? And then you have to kind of, as the viewer, kind of sum it all up, which is fine,
Mhm.
but it's like, just put it in the movie.
Yeah, there's too much of that. There's too much of that sort of cut paste, don't worry about it, it'll work sort of mentality with the movie. But then if you put yourself into the place of just seeing it from a certain perspective, you kind of forgive all that and enjoy the viewing experience, I think. Or you don't and you hate the movie. I haven't seen a single review of this film that wasn't lukewarm at best. I thought it was much better than a lot of people gave it credit for. And I do understand its pitfalls, but if you just kind of see, all right, they were sort of making a mockery, not a mockery, but they were sort of utilizing tongue-in-cheek methods of using these different story techniques. And they did mash them all together. It was a collage. And if you can accept the ending for what it is, which is just it, I mean, I don't know if we should spoil the ending of the movie. We probably shouldn't. It's not the Sixth Sense, guys, but no, we won't.
It's an interesting twist. I'll just say that to the viewers. It's an interesting twist when it makes you think. Because I was like, oh shit. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. I see where this is happening. The reason why I'm saying that too right now is my wife, she was watching it with me and we fell
Poor
asleep.
Jada.
Oh no, she loved it. Jada loved
Oh,
it.
really?
She loved it. She said kudos to John. She loved it. So she's finishing watching it now because we fell asleep while we were watching it. And she's like, how'd it end? And I'm like, oh, you're going to find it interesting. You're either going to hate it or you're going to either love it. She was like, how'd you find it? I said, I loved it. Because if you go into the deeper understanding of it, like it's very simple and then there's a deeper meaning. And that's with a lot of zombie films. We're talking about George A. Romero. He always had meaning. Like Night of the Living Dead is really, it's about the end of racism, is how he set it up, in my opinion. And from what I've read. And this kind of movie does the same thing because it's just about being yourself and just, I feel like, standing up for what you believe in and never giving up.
It's good and it's true. And then you get to see that ultimately, you can interpret it as they're consumed. And in turn, that works with the metaphor about Hong Kong being consumed by China and losing their autonomy. Sort of all works. And that's how the ending hit me. And I was like, that was artistically done. It was well done. I got the point. I thought it was cool. And it's not just boring thing to watch. It's not like watching your homework. The ending sequence is sick. It's done animated because I imagine they didn't have the money to pull that off without Avengers Marvel-esque style special effects. So they animated it. They animated it well, and it's super cool. But it's also the animated portions are pure fantasy, and that's what we sort of get with Lone, is that that's in his head. So did he? There's an idea you can have when you watch the end. This is about as much as I can do to describe it. You can decide whether or not the character engaged in anything past any of the last 10 to 12 minutes of the movie, or if the movie ended exactly 12 minutes earlier and you just watched sort of a fantasy sequence in his head. And like that, it's an interesting way to go about it.
I mean, you could almost make the case that the whole movie is a fantasy scene in his head. He's just sort of wherever he is, and this is just what's going on in his mind.
That could be. He could be sitting in class or work, daydreaming.
I think it works best as the animated bookends are fantasy and what happens in between is the reality. But it could all just be in his mind.
And that would work because everybody in the movie is a foil for Lone.
Yes.
Including his best friend. And he's like, oh, well, now I want a love interest. And here's this bride who was left at the altar for me. And she's super hot and kicks all the asses. My dream girl and all that stuff. And it's funny, like waifu number one, I keep forgetting her name. Shan's, is it her daughter?
Her niece,
The one
Yit.
from the opening sequence? Her niece,
Yit.
yeah. She's off the table. Yit is off the table. You can't have her Yit, Lone. He doesn't really see her that way. They never breach that sort of social contract.
Young
But
does.
Young does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Him
Yeah,
and
of course.
six
Because he
pack.
didn't grow up in the same house. Six pack Young. What's his best contribution? Best friend Six Pack Young. What's his best contribution in the movie? He's 100% just fodder foil. He's power of friendship guy. He's funny though. What he does in his role, he is funny, but he doesn't really accomplish much at all.
No, he's the one with the saw that doesn't work. He's he's the more hapless of the two,
which works well in Lone's arc. Like Lone's mindset of him being the hero too, is he has to take care of Young as well. They're not co-equals.
He states it. He says that I will die before you. Lone to Young. My life will be up for grabs first before your life. So it kind of shows Lone's like a really good friend on that. Not saying Young's not a bad, like he's not a horrible friend, but he's there for the ride. Lone's like, I got you.
Yeah, that's to bolster that whole self-white knight sort of thing. It's that the way he sees himself compared to, and it's definitely in contrast to the way other people see him. He's getting the made fun of and stuff like that throughout the beginning of the movie a little bit.
And you can also look at Young and further that the whole thing is a fantasy because he's kind of like your stereotypical imaginary friend. He just sort of adds to you, but never really to himself. He's Lone's creation almost in that way.
He is really he's a quintessential foil character. It's true. That's so funny. I never thought of it until you described it that way. But yeah, it's very true. God, what else can we point out about this masterpiece? Not really. This good hang. It is a good hang. It's a nice first date, maybe second date. But you're going to see other people kind of movie.
To go with the relationship thing, I kind of like that moment where he runs into his ex-girlfriend who's carrying a baby who she has dressed exactly. Oh, is that yours? No, it can't be. And then he's like, is that mine? No, he's 2. We broke up 6 years ago. Like, it's just, the whole thing is so funny to me.
Well, because he's in his head, like saying, is that mine?
Yeah. He, until he goes and talks to her, it's not his. It doesn't. It can't possibly be. Then he goes and talks. He's like, "Is it mine?" And it's just so preposterous to then hear them say, "We broke up 6 years ago. He's 2."
What's that whole layer?
Double layer for double dragons, which they should get sued for that too. But I guess not. That's Dragon of Heaven, Dragon of Earth. I think there's 7 of each, if I'm not mistaken. Not in the movie, but in the lore. But yeah, there's not really too much more to dig up. This truffle's not too deep. Do you guys have any other foreign movies that you're into? Foreign horror movies that you want to shout out?
I didn't go with 5 other foreign movies or 5 other whatever. I went with 5 other movies that feature killer food.
Killer food. That's gonna be okay. So I know one of them's gonna. I know what one of them's gonna be.
All right, we'll see. All right, so
we'll see. Maybe the obvious one isn't on his list.
We'll start with my number 5, the original street trash, which is Killer Street Hooch that will hollow a person out.
What?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Street Trash is going on
There's
the
a
calendar.
man who was on a bender who wrote that script.
Street Trash is going on the
Yeah, I
calendar.
guess it must.
Number 4, I think we touched on briefly, Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. It's
Yep. Poultrygeist is definitely on. It's in the archives of our recordings for sure.
Number 3, Attack of the Killer Donuts,
Ooh.
What a twist.
which is surprisingly way more fun than it should be. And it's exactly what it sounds like it is.
I mean, everybody wants them to get their revenge. We've been massacring donuts for a century now.
I'm going to
For
go
good
massacre
reason.
a few when we get done. For 2, and it's only 2 because the killer food is a brief appearance. John dies at the end, which has a killer meat monster, which is exactly meat that becomes possessed and assembles into a meat monster.
A meat golem, if you will.
A meat golem. And we're waiting for I Can't Get Enough of
Probably.
The Stuff. Killer Cool with
Yeah, I definitely thought you were going to be at stuff. If you haven't seen this stuff, you have to see the stuff. Why do you have to see the stuff, John, since it's your pick?
Oh, it is everything. It is comedic. It's horror.
It's everything.
It is such a commentary on American consumerism, but you don't even have to see it that way. You can just watch it and see a bonkers movie about Killer Cool Whip.
You got me at Killer Cool Whip. That's
You
why.
haven't
Cool
seen
Whip.
the stuff?
No.
Have you
I
not
have
seen it?
not. Until you've told me.
I think we saw it on VHS.
I
Maybe
definitely
DVD.
saw it on VHS.
The stuff is older.
Yeah, it's mid 80s.
We saw it a long time ago. The stuff was at my friend Matt's house growing up when we were watching B horror movies and trying to see boobs. It was way back in the day. And I most assuredly did not pick up on the commentary on consumerism at the time.
Mhm.
All right. So yeah, the Attack of the Killer Donuts,
Mhm.
right? We skipped over the tomatoes
We skipped.
for good reason.
Yeah.
That's too meta.
Yeah, it's
Too obvious.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right. Poultrygeist. Ryan, do you have a set?
I do. I actually went with top 5 Asian zombie films that I did some research on, as well as movies that I'm familiar with, as well as a couple that I am going to definitely see and recommend people to see if they liked Zombiology. For my 5th pick, #Alive, came out in 2020. It's about Oh Jun-woo, a video game streamer who is stuck in his apartment struggling to survive during the zombie apocalypse. It seems pretty interesting to me. I've seen trailers on Netflix where he's down. Like, how do I get out of this? Very intriguing. Definitely on my list. Number 4 is The Odd Family, Zombie on Sale. It's come from 2019, and the story revolves around the Park family whose lives get disrupted after the elderly father gets bitten by a zombie. So, reading that, seeing the trailer, hooked for B-movie goodness. My 3rd choice is called Wild Zero. Came out in 1990, faces the Phantom, but it's with their version of Kiss fighting zombies. I see John smiling. So have you
So
seen
I haven't
Wild
seen
Zero,
that
John?
one. I haven't seen that one, but it reminds me of a movie called Hard Rock Zombies, which it very much feels like the same premise. It's a rock band fighting zombies.
That's going on my list right now, so I'm writing it down.
Yellow Kings. Not quite zombies, but similar idea with the rock band.
I'll throw in #Alive, way more fun than it should be. And Odd Family,
Okay.
Zombie for
Yeah.
Sale is also, it's ridiculous, but it's so much fun. It's so well made for what it is. It sort of reminds me a lot of Parasite, but with zombies and more comedy. It's a similar family dynamic, I think.
Let's say Parasite and zombies. I'm sold.
I know that's pretty good. That's a pretty good combo. And not like Parasites, listeners. It means the Oscar award winning Parasite.
Number 2 is Train to Busan from 2016. Man, his estranged daughter and other passengers become trapped on a speeding train during a zombie outbreak in South Korea. I have seen bits and pieces of this, not in its entirety. It's a great zombie film. I know I was like, John, you told me they were supposed to do the remake in New York. It got canceled. I'm kind of fine with that because they shouldn't touch the original.
The original is so good. It doesn't have the comedy elements that the other ones you've mentioned have, but it is such an effective zombie movie.
I'm sold on it. And then the last one is from 1998, good old 90s film, Biozombie. 2 mall employees driving to work hit a man who drank a soda laced with a chemical that turns people into cannibals. Sold on that.
It's always soda. The slurm method
It's
of getting
such a good
zombified.
movie.
It was probably
Such a
Code
good
Red.
Soda
movie.
was so interwoven into the 1980s.
That's my 5.
It's a good list.
Yeah, it is a good list.
Thank you. We've been having a lot of good lists the last few weeks.
They are good. And they inspire future episodes, which is also good. But definitely check out some of the movies, their IMDb's and stuff like that the guys mentioned in their top 5s. And yeah, that was Zombiology. So we reached out across at least one ocean for that one. And it's available on Amazon Prime if you want to watch it. I'll probably throw the trailer up at the end of the video like I always do. If you're listening, though, you're going to have to find it your damn self. Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Be very afraid.